If I were to forget my entire knowledge in Spanish and start over in 2025, this is what I'll do to get fluent in 2025. You see, 2025 is coming up in a few days. Depending on when I'm recording this and when I'm uploading it, it's going to be different for everyone. And around about 3 years from the beginning of 2025, so the beginning of 2022, was when I discovered learning Spanish and actually trying to get fluent in Spanish. I was 12 years old, and this guy in my class has started doing Duolingo. If you don't know, in Sweden, we choose between two languages as our third language. So in my school, we're a bilingual school, and we speak Swedish, of course, because we're in Sweden, and English, and then also we get to choose another language, which you have to choose between Spanish and French. So naturally, being a normal kid, I chose Spanish because it's easier, and that was like 4 years ago from now. And about a year later after that, just studying Spanish, right, getting grades, this guy in my class started using Duolingo in his free time, and he started like improving his Spanish. And this guy wasn't necessarily like a smart student necessarily. He had mediocre grades, right, like D, C. But in Spanish, he was like a top student. He was one of the best, if not the best, in our class. And so that kind of started a trend in our class to start studying like Duolingo, and different apps went around for the French students as well. All of us started doing Duolingo, and so that was literally like the beginning of 2022, around that time. And so as time moved on, I wanted to be the best. I was slightly jealous of his progress, slightly, especially since it was a trend in our class. And so I started doing research on other Spanish apps, other apps for getting fluent in Spanish, other apps for learning Spanish. I found this YouTuber one day. His name was Ikenna, or he's like a very popular YouTuber for learning languages in general. And he made this video about different language learning apps. And for me, I didn't have any money because I was like 12, about to turn 13. So I didn't want to spend any money. And he recommended one app, which he put in the S tier compared to all the other apps. He put Duolingo firstly into like a D tier, something low. And I'd been using Duolingo for a bit. I made like no progress, if I'm going to be honest. I made very little progress. And in that video, he pointed out an app called Language Transfer. And it was free. And so I was like, all right, great. Let's download this app. And I started using it for a bit. Within the first 10 lessons, my mind was like kind of blown because the way he explained Spanish grammar was just so much easier to understand than all the other like things that I'd been using, like Duolingo and stuff. And so I started recommending that app to my friends, and I also discovered other apps like Memrise and all this. And when I told one of my friends about him, he started doing it as well. He literally wanted to gatekeep the app, Language Transfer, because of how good it was. And so we kept it a secret for a bit, like oh, there's this app, but I'm not going to tell you guys. But then people started discovering it, and some people actually started using it. And it all started from just me discovering it and being so mind blown about it. And so me and my one friend, this guy that wanted to gatekeep this app, we both started doing language transfer together to sort of learn Spanish together. And so I remember even one time, it was our break, but our Spanish teacher let us stay inside to study Spanish. So we opened our Chromebooks and we had language transfer on we were listening to it together, and we were just getting even more mind blown through just basic he was explaining basic conjugation, but our mind just got even more like mind blown. And it was just because of the way he explained it. And so from that point, we made it our goal to watch one language transfer lesson a day. And this was perfect for me and for him because we both lived quite far away from our school, like an hour away with train. So I started making it a routine to listen to one language transfer lesson every day on the way to school. And he also wanted to do that. And it was our goal actually during the summer of 2022, that summer, to study 1 hour Spanish a day to get fluent. And so during this time, as I was doing language transfer, I discovered another YouTuber named Language Lords, and he made this video where he got fluent in Spanish in like 46 days or something crazy, or 44 days. And you probably see this video, it's a very viral video. And in that, he explains a few methods of how he got fluent. And essentially, what I did was I took those concepts of how he got fluent, and I used those as inspiration to create my own methods to get fluent, which I would then use during the summer of 2022. And so I did one language transfer lesson a day. It's 90 lessons, so it took about 3 months. And by that point, the summer break had started then. And also at this point, my friend kind of gave up. He made it to like halfway of language transfer, but then he didn't really have the motivation to continue. So I was kind of on my own, which was kind of sad. But anyway, during that summer of 2022, I went over language transfer again. So I went over essentially Spanish grammar again. And I also tested a bunch of different exercises. First, I kind of replicated the exercise that this guy, Language Lords, did on YouTube. So I tried doing his methods, but they didn't really work out that well. So instead, I kind of tweaked them a little and made them into my own methods, which I executed. And essentially, it was just speaking Spanish and listening and studying to native Spanish. So native Spanish content, essentially. And so I made those into my own exercises where I took the transcript, which is what he did. I essentially took the transcript and studied through that. And I also spoke a lot of Spanish in my free time. I also tried a bunch of other methods like flashcards and, you know, conjugation tables and like all these different methods. But what I actually fixated on were those two methods because that's what I saw Language Lords did, and he got fluent like 44 days. So I was like, all right, let me try this. And I did have quite a bit of motivation to learn because before that summer, there was also one more YouTuber that I found. His name was Xiaoma, and he's a Chinese YouTuber technically. He's a white guy that essentially learned Chinese, and now he goes around speaking Chinese and impresses people. That's pretty much his content in a nutshell. And he made like a public announcement: I'm going to get fluent in Spanish in 30 days. And then later on during the summer, I saw another one of the videos where he said how I got fluent in Spanish in 20 days. And it was a video where he just spoke Spanish. And this guy, he was able to have conversations with natives just like that in like 20 days. And so from that video, and based on what he did, the reason why he made a video announcing that he was going to learn Spanish was because he saw a study where people were more likely to achieve their goals when they announced it to their friends and stuff. So I went up to all my friends and people at school and my family, and I told them like, I'm going to get fluent in Spanish in this amount of time. I'm going to get fluent in Spanish during this summer. And so I did have a lot of motivation to do this exercise. And so I did this exercise repeatedly during the summer, and especially near the end of the summer, because that's when it was like, oh shit, school is starting soon, I got to get fluent. And on top of that, I started speaking with natives on an app called Hello Talk, which is like essentially is like you just interact with people over the world, especially in the language that you want to learn. And so after doing those exercises, after doing those essentially two exercises over and over again, I remember one day I went on Hello Talk and I was trying to have conversations with this native, and we were just talking and an hour passed by, and after I hung up like the call, I was like, whoa, I just had an hour-long conversation with a native speaker in only Spanish. Wow. Like I was like mind blown, because it was like, it kind of clicked in my brain now, like this is it. Like I'm not able to speak Spanish. And so I came back to school and we had a new Spanish teacher. I went up to her and started speaking Spanish with her. Some of my classmates were like, oh, what did you do to learn Spanish like this quickly? And what happened is, on the way home, I would go on Hello Talk to speak Spanish with people. And I was just able to like have 20-30 minute conversations in Spanish just like that. And so total, I spent around 120 hours of studying. I took language transfer twice, and I did those two exercises, which I now call transcript training and narrate, elaborate, contemplate, which essentially a listening exercise and a speaking exercise. And then an additional like 20 hours from like Duolingo and, you know, bad methods that didn't work. Anyways, in total, I spent around 120 hours of studying, and that's what got me conversationally fluent in Spanish. And so I did that in less than a year. Like from the point where I started doing language transfer, which by the way, I did one lesson a day, and one lesson is like 10 minutes. So altogether, it's 120 hours of studying I did to get fluent, which, by the way, that's less than an hour a day if you were going to get fluent in 1 year. In 1 year, what is that? 120? Wait, let's divide that. Hold on. Yeah, it's about 18 minutes a day. In terms of fully studying, 120 hours in 365 days is 18 minutes a day. So I would get to the same point in about 18 minutes of studying using the correct methods a day to get fluent in 1 year. Now, here is the blueprint I would use to get fluent in Spanish in 2025. There are 3 goals, and these are the same 3 goals that I did myself, okay? 3 steps, 3 goals. The first goal is to get comfortable with conjugating verbs and essentially just get comfortable with Spanish grammar. That is the first step. The second goal is to get comfortable with listening to real spoken Spanish, real native Spanish, and start speaking with a good Spanish accent, and to just get comfortable with both of those two. And the third goal is to finally put everything together and have conversations with natives, to get comfortable with having conversations with natives. Those are the 3 goals. And first goal is to essentially get comfortable with grammar. That is essentially know how to conjugate verbs, and especially, and this is what most people miss, to understand the why certain things happen in Spanish. This is my framework I call the 3 W's, and this is why language transfer works so well, okay? Grammar, and just Spanish in general, is 3 W's. What, where, and why. What is the actual verb, or the word, or whatever we're talking about, the vocabulary, right? That is the what. I eat is como, right? That's what. It's como. Where is where this is placed. So I eat it is lo como. The lo, the it comes before como, right? That's a where. That is where these words come. So we have what the words are and where the words are placed. Most people stop here because generally this is all they need. However, to learn grammar as fast as possible, you need to understand why these two occur. Why is I eat como? Why? Because of this rule, which then we explain that rule. That is what language transfer did. Why is lo placed before como? Because words that get the verb done to them, like it, or them, or him, or her, come before the changed verb, and como is a changed verb. But the point being, when you understand the why, things click, and when things click, they make sense, and when things make sense, you remember them more. When things actually make sense, when it computes in your brain, when you get that aha moment, then you remember it more. So just directly, what I would do to get fluent, if I was going to start over, I would take the language transfer course, but I would probably take it several times because it's essentially you're listening to someone else learn Spanish. Or if I had any money to spend, I would take just my own course, which I've created. But assuming I can't create my own course, which I've created now, I would probably do language transfer because that is the only, or it doesn't have to be language transfer, but essentially finding rules to why certain things happen in Spanish. Why does tener to conjugate to tiene? Like, why does that E turn to IE, right? It's, for example, that. The great thing about language transfer is that he explains that. And that is something that none of the other apps do. All the other apps, they either have a bad explanation or they simply don't explain it and you're left to memorize. So that's the first thing I would do. The second is to get comfortable with listening to natives and speaking Spanish with a good accent. And all that comes to is to climb the LUR and SIR ladders. LUR stands for listen, understand, and repeat. SIR stands for speak, understand, and repeat. Actually, I'm going to turn this into a presentation so that I can go through these with you. So we know that the equation to get fluent, the way to get fluent, is speaking times understanding, because that is a conversation. A conversation is I speak and you understand me, and then we swap. You speak and I'm understanding you. That is a conversation. That is fluency. Fluidity when you speak. And so it is speaking, grammar, and vocab. Essentially, to get fluent, we need to speak Spanish grammar and vocab and understand Spanish grammar and vocab. And that vocab and grammar should be native, okay? And so that is where the LUR and SIR ladders come in, okay? LUR stands for listen, understand, and repeat. We repeat these steps, okay? You are listening to native Spanish content. We are listening to natives, and we are listening and repeating that over and over and over again, just like how we learned as kids. SIR, we speak, understand, and we repeat that over and over and over again, because that is how we spoke as kids, and that's how we learned how to speak as kids. Now, this is not just done a few times, this is done over and over again. These ladders are essentially infinitely long, because you're always going to improve in the language by listening and understanding and speaking and understanding the language. And there's always more room to improve in a language. So these are actually infinitely tall ladders, but there's a point where when you repeat them enough, you will reach conversational fluency. And so the first exercise we're going to use to climb the LUR ladder, which is the hardest ladder to climb because understanding Spanish is way harder than speaking it, is called transcript training. And this is the exercise that is inspired from Language Lords. And this is what I really focused on and hyperfixated on during the summer 2022 to get fluent. So this is how it kind of looks in the ladder. These are kind of like the stepping stones we use to get fluent. This exercise is what we do. So this is how to execute the exercise step by step. This is the blueprint, the plan. You're gonna find a piece of native Spanish content, and it could be one piece or several pieces, but in total it should be 1 hour long. And it has to be native, it has to be quick, it has to be Spanish that you don't understand. Like that, it has to be native Spanish fast content, okay? First, you're gonna watch and listen with Spanish subtitles, okay? First step. And as soon as you hear a word or a sentence that you don't understand, okay, now though you've already understood the grammar and you know why certain things happen in grammar, when you see something either grammatical or you see something as a vocabulary word that you don't understand it. And the way to understand it, translate. We use an app called DeepL for translation. So you can either translate it to English subtitles, which sometimes is good, but sometimes is inaccurate, or you can directly translate it using DeepL. I used to do both, so yeah. And if there's a grammatical thing that you don't understand, then you go to a website called SpanishDict.com, and that is where you can see the patterns of conjugation. And the goal there is to understand what they were saying and the concepts of it. This means when someone says, for example, no tiene sentido, what it that directly translates to is it doesn't have felt or feeling, right? But when you translate that in DeepL, you get it doesn't make sense. And so what does that give you? That gives you that tener sentido, to have sentido, feeling, is for something to make sense. So it doesn't make sense is no tiene sentido. It does make sense is tiene sentido, right? And then you work from there. That is where you understand the concepts behind them. Now you rewatch that Spanish content that you just watched, but without any subtitles. And this is where you want to understand like the fast Spanish. And if you do struggle hearing the words, firstly try to think about how if they're mushed together, right? For example, I heard someone say acá estoy, which in the subtitles says acá estoy, but they pronounced it acá estoy. And so you really want to try to think about how it's smushed together in order to understand it. And if it's really hard, you can slow it down. But then once you understand the slow down, you have to speed it back up. This is very important. And now when you understand that tiny one sentence of Spanish that you didn't understand, you're going to repeat that until the entire hour-long Spanish content is finished. For me, it took about an hour of Spanish content. That is why I'm recommending an hour, okay? And so I did about a 40-minute episode of a Spanish series that I watched, and then also 2 10-minute videos on YouTube, which is an hour. That is how much it took for me to really get fluent. And this process should take you so long, okay? This process, it took me half an hour to understand 2 minutes of Spanish content. And then the next day, I forgot it. And that was when I first did it in the beginning of the summer of 2022. But you have to understand that it is repetition. You're going to start understanding it more and more. But we're not just repeating words. We're repeating concepts. We're repeating grammatical verb conjugations. And we're repeating fast-spoken Spanish. We're practicing fast-spoken Spanish. That is the whole goal. And that is how you climb the Lur ladders. Next is narrate, elaborate, contemplate. This is how we're going to climb the Sur ladder. So the Sur ladder is just this. We repeat these. These are stepping stones for climbing this ladder. So first you narrate a story. You tell a story. Now it doesn't have to be these examples. He's eating, I'm eating, they see him, whatever. Just speak about something. The easiest thing to speak about is your own personal experience in something. Talk about your first pet, or a time that you got embarrassed, or play a game of, I don't know, would you rather with yourself, and then try to explain, like, just speak Spanish. That is the first step. Just speak Spanish in anything. I personally would tell stories. Then you're gonna elaborate more. So this is just speak more about it, right? He was eating a sandwich under the bench at 8:20 a.m. while the sun was shining on his face, right? Elaborate, give more details. And then finally, you can start questioning, you can start contemplating, because think about it, in a real conversation, that is kind of what is going to happen. You might tell something and then they might ask you, oh, but elaborate on that, and then you elaborate on it, and then finally the guy might, when you're speaking to someone, he might ask you a few questions about your story, like, oh, why was he under the tree eating a sandwich, right? And then you have to now answer that. And so this is just my simple framework for getting words out of your mouth. And just like with the Lur ladder, when we're doing the transcript training, when you don't understand a word, when you don't know how to say a word, you go to DeepL, which is a translator website, or you go to SpanishDict.com, which is a conjugation website where you can find the different tenses in Spanish. And there you can find out how to say what you want to say. So let's say I didn't know how to say, did I drink the smoothie last night because I was tired? So did I drink? So I drink. Or I drank in this case, past tense, right? Unless I don't know the verb like drink, like beber or tomar, right? Then I would say, okay, how do you say that? Then I would go to the website and find out. And then you just speak it again. And when you're doing this exercise, when you're speaking Spanish, try to replicate the accent that you heard from transcript training. And this is how you start developing that native Spanish accent as well. And you'll find yourself speaking Spanish more quicker, like much faster and much more natively when you do this. And so you repeat that over and over again. Final step is to speak with natives. Speaking with natives is the best exercise to learn Spanish. Why? Because our goal is to speak with natives, right? Our goal is to be able to have conversations with natives. And so the best way to learn Spanish is to have conversations with natives. It's as simple as that. The YouTuber Shauma, the way he got fluent was he spoke with natives over and over and over and over and over and over again until he was fluent. That's how he got fluent in 20 days. And so if we want to replicate that, we got to do the exact same thing. So starting speak from day one is vital. That is like the thing that language transfer does as well. So if I was going to give you the tip, I would take my course for that, which is why I also go through with you and speak Spanish and make you speak Spanish from day one, or as a free alternative, language transfer. If you want to know the difference, by the way, between me and language transfer course, is just that, firstly, both of them I would recommend to anyone. Language transfer course is 12 hours. Mine is quite a bit shorter than that, and mine is like a presentation where I go through it with you rather than an audio, like a podcast. But both are great, both are perfect. Now, all you do is go on an app like Hello Talk, or talk to one of your Spanish friends, or just try to find a native and just try to speak with him. And it's fine if you mess up. It's fine if you aren't comfortable, even if you're an introvert, okay? My best tip for actually getting into those calls, because I remember my first call, it was so nerve-wracking. I was so nervous. It was just such a terrifying experience because it's embarrassing. Like, you don't know the language, and then now you're trying to speak with someone. I remember one time, like, this girl from Spain, she was speaking with me, and she asked me a question, and then I stood silent because I didn't know what she said. And then she was like, Hamid. And I was like, oh, you asked me a question. I guarantee you, people like people that are interested in them. And most people are interested in their own language. Most people, like, if you heard a Spanish speaker trying to speak English, you would probably, like, help her or him. So the same thing sort of applies with Spanish speakers. They're super hospitable. They want to help you learn Spanish. And on Hello Talk, you can do language exchange where you teach someone English and they teach you Spanish. And it's essentially just that you guys speaking with each other. So personally, if you want to know what I did, I didn't really get a language partner that well. I got one language partner, which was kind of like but I mostly went on these live chats where I spoke Spanish with those natives on the live chats rather than on anything else. But like, I'm telling you, both of those methods are completely fine. Like, just speak with natives. And again, you repeat this process of when you don't know how to say something, when you don't understand what they said, repeat it and go on to translate it. And then when you don't understand a grammatical concept, SpanishDict.com helps you with that. If you want to know how to do this exercise even better, I have a video where I go through transcript training and also these different methods. You can just go on my channel. And if you want to get coaching from me in Spanish to get fluent, even in 2025 is coming up in a few days, a few weeks maybe, depending on when you're watching this. If you are dead set on these goals, you can check the description and add me on Discord if you want coaching from me. That being said, I hope this video helped you, bro, and stay humble.